All right. Looks like this is the conclusion of the cabinet meeting lasting well over an hour. I think about 2 hours now. Donald Trump in the cabinet room with all of his cabinet secretaries answering a whole lot of questions there at the end, including many about those Venezuelan boat strikes, including the one where there was a second strike where survivors were killed. That story has been dominating the news over the past few days. And it's a story that the White House has been trying to get its story straight on over the past few days as well. First, the administration said the second strike never happened. That was part of the explanation. Then they said it did happen, adding the strikes were always intended to be lethal. But that Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, never directly ordered the second strike and never said to, quote, kill everybody, as the Washington Post had reported. Now they're laying the responsibility for the second strike on Admiral Mitch Bradley, who they call an American hero. At the same time, Secretary Hegseth, as you have been listening to over this past few hours, he's still working to justify the actions. Here's another portion of one of the answers about the strikes just a moment ago during the cabinet meeting.
I'll say again, we've only just begun striking narco boats and putting narco terrorists at the bottom of the ocean because they've been poisoning the American people. And Joe Biden tried to approach it with kid gloves and allowed them to come across the border. Cartels take over community, 20 million people, hundreds of thousands of Americans poisoned. And President Trump said, no, we're taking the gloves off. We're taking the fight to these designated terror organizations. And it's exactly what we're doing. So we're stopping the drugs. We're striking the boats. We're defeating narco terrorists. And we're standing.
And you may say one thing, that drugs coming in through the sea by sea are down 91%. And I don't know who the 9% is.
I'm not sure either, sir.
But down 91% by sea.
We've had a bit of a pause because it's hard to find boats to strike right now, which is the entire point, right? Deterrence has to matter, not arrest and hand over and then do it again, the rinse and repeat approach of previous administrations. This is meant to get after that approach. And I will just end by saying, as President Trump always has our back, we always have the back of our commanders who are making decisions in difficult situations, and we do in this case and all these strikes. They're making judgment calls and ensuring that they defend the American people. They've done the right things. We'll keep doing that, and we have their backs, Mr. President.
Take a look at the stagecraft there, the setting. Hegseth sitting right next to the president. It tells you a lot, including what the president seems to think about the chatter that Pete Hegseth is causing unnecessary headaches for the administration, which the Washington Post reports he is. As Pentagon officials tell the Post, they are alarmed by the administration appearing to scapegoat Admiral Bradley. From one of them talking to the Post, this is protect Pete BS. And from another, it's throwing us, these service members, under the bus. It's also not going over well in Congress, as two congressional committees are demanding answers from the Pentagon, including potentially the audio logs of that September strike itself, which should include Hegseth, since he told Fox News the day after it happened that he was there.
I can tell you that was definitely not artificial intelligence. I watched it live. We knew exactly who was in that boat. We knew exactly what they were doing, and we knew exactly who they represented. And that was Tren de Aragua, a narco-terrorist organization designated by the United States, trying to poison our country with illicit drugs.
So Congress is still waiting on the evidence that shows that they were narco-terrorists, as the defense secretary has been alleging. They're also waiting for more information on that second strike. Hegseth is now saying, just said a moment ago in that cabinet meeting, that he never saw the second strike. He was there for the first one, as he told Fox News, but he says he never saw the second one. And he added that Admiral Bradley, in his words, quote, made the right call. Joining us, MS Now's congressional reporter Michael Schnell and MS Now senior White House reporter Vaughn Hilliard. So, Vaughn, the administration is, I don't want to say they're in lockstep, but they are aligned. The president and Pete Hegseth are aligned in trying to justify what happened that day, no matter what.
Right. I think we have to take a step back here and just look at the totality of those remarks, as you just did, Katie. And that is the fact that the President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief, sitting next to the Secretary of Defense, the head of the Pentagon, they're effectively stood by as his Secretary of Defense said that they are not going to treat these narco-terrorists, as he calls them, the alleged drug boats, as anything other than they would al-Qaeda or members of ISIS, and suggesting that they are not going to pat them on the head is the way that Hegseth described it, but instead they are going to use kinetic, lethal means to kill them. And the President of the United States sat there in solidarity and said that he defended the decisions that were being made by Pete Hegseth, as well as the admiral who is overseeing this mission here. And going even a step further than that, when we're looking at, beyond these 21 strikes, including the strikes that are on September 2nd, but the President of the United States explicitly suggesting that he is prepared and planning to move forward with strikes that are not just on water and international seas, but also on land. He did not go into specifics about what exactly that looks like. When Pete Hegseth was asked specifically about those September 2nd strikes, though, he suggested that he was there, in fact, listening live and watching that first strike. But then he went to other meetings at the Pentagon when the decision was made an hour, 2 hours later to move forward with that second strike. He did not explicitly say the extent to which he was aware of the second strike and whether those two individuals who the Washington Post reports as having been killed in that second strike were in fact targets, or was the ship in the drug on board, allegedly on board, were those the targets of this here? And I think one other point here, as I try to roll back through my notes here, Katie, is the fact there when you look at Pete Hegseth here, he made the very specific comment about Admiral Bradley, who is overseeing that mission, saying Admiral Bradley made the correct decision to ultimately sink the boat and eliminate the threat. He made the right call. We have his back. So this then goes to Admiral Bradley in the question about whether he was, in fact, commanded to kill everybody on board and whether he was executing orders from not just the top of the Pentagon, but also the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, because President Trump did not sidestep the attack and the impact of those two strikes and the killing of those 11 individuals who were on board it. He only went as far as to go even further in suggesting that they will move beyond just international waters to move forward with these attacks, but they will also start moving forward with targeting drug runners on land. Katie.
Vaughn, thank you so much. We're going to have Congressman Jim Himes, the ranking member of House Intel, on in just a moment. But, Michael, first I want to get a broader look at Congress from you. Lawmakers are back from the Thanksgiving break. How many of them are interested in these strikes?
Immense interest, Katie, on both sides of the aisle. As you mentioned, Congress returned back to session last night, House and Senate. It was their first time back since this bombshell report by the Washington Post. And a lot of lawmakers want answers. They want to find out what exactly happened during that September 2nd strike. And that's, of course, a large majority, if not all Democrats, but also a large handful of Republicans are curious and concerned about the reports of what happened. And they just want to get down to understanding what exactly occurred. So first and foremost, the chairman and ranking member of the House and Senate Armed Services Committees both said that they would be conducting oversight into those September 2nd strikes. I spoke to Congressman Adam Smith last night. He is the ranking member, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. He said that he is likely going to meet with Admiral Bradley on Thursday to discuss this strike. So really, lawmakers want answers, but the place and where we start to get difference in terms of reaction and response is whether or not folks think that Hegseth and Admiral Bradley or the Trump administration at large is liable for war crimes here. We know that is something that the Post had alleged in its story. We heard this morning from Speaker Mike Johnson, who really didn't show much concern with the strike, saying that under his understanding, the second strike was within the bounds of what the administration was trying to accomplish. But I also spoke last night to Senator Lisa Murkowski. She's the Republican from Alaska. She's, of course, no huge fan of the Trump administration, oftentimes does criticize him on things like this. I pressed her on if she thinks that the second strike was an example of a war crime. She wouldn't go there, but she came pretty close, saying that she doesn't think that an act of that nature would be aligned with the rules of war. Take a listen to both Speaker Johnson and Lisa Murkowski.
My assessment of this, my understanding is that most of the people that have looked at this, at least in a preliminary review, say that the admiral who ordered the second strike thought it was necessary to complete the mission. Secondary strikes are not unusual. It has to happen if a mission is going to be completed.
I think most would say that when you have two individuals that are literally floating in the water, a second order to kill them all is not something that we would consider within the rules of war.
So again, Katie, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, they want to conduct their oversight here to find out more information of what actually happened on September 2nd. But then when you start to get into the conversation of, well, should that second strike have even happened? Was it potentially a war crime? That's where you start to see this divide within the Republican Party that we expect to play out even more over the coming days as, again, Congress tries to glean more information about these strikes.
America the isolated. There was a time when America could make one phone call and half the world would listen. That era feels distant now. Under Trump, the United States isn't leading the orchestra anymore. It's playing solo, louder and more off-key than ever. What he calls strength, the world reads as desperation. India is frustrated by his tariffs. Europe is exhausted by his unpredictability. Latin America is resisting his bullying. Even traditional allies like Australia are watching every handshake twice. Trump has managed to turn a partnership into suspicion. He calls it independence, others call it isolation. The truth is, power doesn't vanish overnight. It fades as trust erodes. For decades, America's greatest weapon wasn't its army, but its reliability. Allies could depend on Washington's word, and markets could depend on its stability. Now, every tweet and threat shakes that faith. Trump treats diplomacy like a boxing match. There has to be a winner and a loser. But in geopolitics, that thinking breaks everything. Nations stop cooperating out of fear and start planning for life after you. That's exactly what's happening. India is drawing closer to Russia and Iran despite the pressure. Europe is investing in defense systems that don't depend on the U.S. umbrella. African and Asian nations are exploring new financial alliances with China and the BRICS bloc. The more Trump shouts, America first, the more the world quietly answers, then go ahead alone. Even his wins come wrapped in unease. Isolation isn't just a diplomatic problem, it's a psychological one. Once a nation starts believing it's surrounded by enemies, it starts acting like one. Every criticism feels like sabotage, every question like betrayal. Trump's rhetoric feeds that paranoia, a story where only he sees the truth and the rest of the world conspires against him. The result? The United States is more divided abroad than ever. The American brand, once synonymous with opportunity, now carries the weight of unpredictability. Investors hesitate. Students rethink visas. Allies explore alternatives. The world isn't anti-American, it's anti-instability. And under Trump, instability is the only constant. Empires rarely fall with a bang. They fade through arrogance. America's decline won't come from defeat in war, but from self-inflicted solitude. Trump wanted to make America feared again. He succeeded, but fear is a poor substitute for respect. And isolation is a terrible definition of greatness.